You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith.
I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 7, Episode 5.
Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net.
Well, hey, friend, and welcome to Feathers this week. As always, I am so glad you're here. Guys, I am so crazy excited about this week. There are just a few guests that I've had on a little bucket list of people I might like to interview for this podcast, and today I am thrilled to have one of them on here. Today we have Katie Davis Majors. You may know her from her bestseller, Kisses from Katie, which tells a story of her stepping out in faith and moving to Uganda as a young woman and eventually adopting 13 girls. I so wish this podcast had been out when that book came out because it's just, I don't know, I think it's just like the perfect Feather story. But today she goes back and shares a bit of that story, but she also shares from her new book out called Daring to Hope, Finding God's Goodness in the Broken and Beautiful. And y'all, if you liked Kisses from Katie, you are going to love this one. I devoured the book in like 2 days. I shed tears. I smiled. It was an incredible book. Katie just has an incredible gift of writing. She is able to just weave circumstances and feelings and theology all together, and you just feel like you're taking the ride right with her. And yet at the same time, it is able to speak to your own story. And I just had 30 short minutes with Katie a couple days ago, and of course she is on a tight timeline with other interviews, but I'm so excited to share our conversation with you today. Katie is so sweet, and to me she is just the Mother Teresa of our time, and I just love the work and the heart that she has. You know, she just really is trying to obey God and love people, and she's just such an inspiration to me. So I'm excited to bring this conversation to you today. So here we go.
Well, hey, Katie, and welcome to Feathers today.
Hi, Amy.
I'm so glad to have you on today. I would love if you could just start us out, for those that don't know you, if you could introduce yourself and your family.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Katie Majors. I live in Uganda with my family, and my family consists of my husband and our 14 children, 12 daughters who are adopted, and then our son Noah, who was just born about a year and a half ago. And we live and work here. We are part of a ministry called Amazima that does child sponsorship.
Yeah, so you tell the full story in your first book called Kisses from Katie, about how you got there, because that is quite a mouthful saying all that. It's like all the questions,
Yes.
From that. But I just wonder if you could take a few minutes to talk about how you got to Uganda, and you mentioned your ministry a little bit, about what your family does with that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I moved to Uganda when I graduated from high school. I'd been here on a short-term trip with my mom for 3 weeks, and it just really, the people captured my heart. And as I went back home from that short trip to finish high school, really thought and prayed about possibly coming back. So I came back with the commitment to serve for 1 year here, teaching kindergarten at an orphanage. And as I was here, I fell more and more in love with the culture and the people, but I also noticed some things that were really heartbreaking to me. And one of the most heartbreaking was the fact that a lot of the children living in the orphanage that I was teaching actually had parents or relatives who really loved them and cared about them and would visit, and their only hurdle and only reason for not raising their own kids was financial. School costs a lot of money here, and just the simple burdens that all parents face, putting food on the table and medical care and things like that. Because of financial poverty, people were being forced to give up their children, and I just really thought that was so tragic and was surprised to find that out, honestly. So I began paying school fees for 2 little girls who were at risk of being put in the orphanage by their grandmother. And as I began to share this story with different people from back home, my parents and friends, the overwhelming response was, wow, I would love to help be a part of that, or I would love to be involved in some way. And so within about 6 months, I was paying school fees with the help of parents and friends. I was paying for about 40 children to go to school. And so I felt like it was probably time to, to put a name to it and kind of call it a program. And that's kind of how Amazima Ministries was born. Today we have about 600 children that are being sponsored educationally. So Amazima pays for their schooling and some medical care and some nutritional support if necessary. But probably the most important thing that we do, and my favorite part of the program, is the discipleship component, where we have a mentor who's trained as a social worker, but we call them mentors because there's so much more than that. And they spend time in the children's homes each week and just get to know them and know their families. They study the Bible with them, and they really form these crucial relationships. And so our goal through Amazima is really to raise up the next generation of Ugandans to love and serve their own country and to pour back in. And this year we opened a secondary school, which is probably our biggest project to date. Secondary school is high school here. And a lot of our children were having to be sent off to boarding school to find a school that would really give them a solid education. The closest is probably about 2 hours from us. So we were sponsoring these kids to go to boarding school and really felt like we were losing that relational connection with them at a really crucial age. And so this year we opened our high school. We have 72 students that go to school there and are taught, but also discipled and just taught the Word of God and the love of Jesus. And it's just been incredible to see the life transformation there. And I mean, obviously I said I moved here for a year at first, but I'm still here. In that time as well.
Has it been like 10 years now? 10 or 11 years?
Yeah, it's been 10 years. It was 10 years last month, which is crazy to say. You know, it feels like forever, and at the same time, it feels like it never could have been 10 years. Just amazing, all the work God has done in that time. He's also, obviously, as I said, grown my family. I began to foster my first 3 children after being here for about a year. And was fostering them with the intention of trying to find family members or somebody local who could take them in. And when that didn't happen, I began to move forward with the adoption paperwork and process, which is quite a long process here in Uganda. And over the course of those next few years, God brought 10 other little girls to me that were in need of a home. Our girls are all sibling sets, and most of them were older when they came to stay with me. So a little bit harder to find a family for an older sibling set. So for many different reasons, we weren't able to find, alternative family for me and they all stayed. And then about 7 years ago, I met my husband. About 3 years ago, we were married, and we just welcomed our first biological son into the world a little over a year ago.
Well, congratulations. I just have to tell you that the days that you announced that you were getting married or that you had gotten married and you're having a baby, those were some of the most exciting days. So excited for you guys.
Thank you. That is so sweet. Thank you. I mean, talk about a miracle that God would, bring alongside a man who felt called to also raising up these young women. It's pretty incredible. I think I had long ago laid aside kind of that desire to be married and thought, maybe that's just not in the cards for me, and that's okay. It would take somebody with a really special heart and a really special calling to desire to not only walk alongside us in this life, but to really lead our family. And what a testimony to God's faithfulness that he brought exactly the perfect husband and father for us.
Well, it is. I mean, that's exactly, you took the words out of my mouth. It's just what a special individual it would take. So as I prepared for this, I was asking my friends if they would have any questions for you. And so that's what they asked about is, how did you meet her husband? So was he already working in Uganda?
Yeah, he was here. Like me, actually, he came over on a shorter term trip just for a couple months. He was volunteering at an orphanage for HIV positive children and also helping out a little bit at a special needs orphanage that is in the area here. And he really felt burdened for the men of the country. He was a youth pastor in the States, and he came here originally to work with youth and found that there were a lot of missionaries missionaries and a lot of mission organizations already geared toward youth and really geared toward helping women, but there weren't really any programs geared toward helping men and discipling men and kind of teaching men how to be better husbands and fathers. And so he went back to the States to raise some support and to work for a little while and kind of build up some savings, and then came back just with the intention of being here full time to disciple young men. And he had about 30 men that he was working with and meeting with consistently just to study the Bible. It was really, really incredible. And a lot of those men he's still in relationship with today. So he was around, and we were just kind of ran in the same circle. We went to the same church, and we were part of the same Bible study group. So we had known each other for a while, and actually he had asked me out a couple times, and I had given my very adamant no, just thinking, oh my goodness, this season of life is so crazy already, and so many people need so much of me. Like, how could I even devote any time to one more relationship, right? But as the years passed, I really was able to see his heart for the Lord on display so clearly. And it was so attractive to see somebody who just loved Jesus and pursued him with everything that he had. So, I think I was really drawn toward the way he intentionally pursues people as well, and just loves them and desires to see the gospel go forth.
Well, it's just so, I don't know, I'm cheesing like a little schoolgirl over here because you guys are so cute together. So in your new book, you talk a little bit about this. The new book is called Daring to Hope. And I just have to tell you that I drew like heart eyes out on parts of it. And I actually have written at the end, I just died 1,000 deaths. It's so cute when as he was pursuing you and you guys are just deciding to be together. And it's just so cute. And it's just, I think for me, it's just a testimony to how God puts families together, and it's not just one way, and it's not in just one order necessarily. And our God is so big, and it's just so beautiful to see.
Absolutely. It is so beautiful, and just, his faithfulness to give us what we need, even when we don't know what we need, or we think we need something else, or we want something different. It's amazing.
Right. So, well, and I do have to go back to your first book, Kisses from Katie. I mean, I just have to say what an impact that it had on me personally. Our family has adopted, and your courage and obedience is just so inspiring. I know I have a friend, Amanda, and she has said the same thing, that your story just really impacted them, and they actually just adopted from Uganda I think it was December. Their daughter came.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it was just, it's just incredible to see how, God opened doors, and, you walk through them despite what culture would say that you should do, or even what your dad said that you should do. And that's really just the heartbeat behind this podcast, is just, following God no matter what. So first of all, thank you so much for running Kisses from Katie.
Oh, thank you.
But I do want to jump in today to talk about your new book called Daring to Hope, Finding God's Goodness in the Broken and the Beautiful. And oh my goodness, I mentioned I was writing in the margin, I have marked this book up. It is a gorgeous book.
Oh, thank you. That's like the biggest compliment for an author when somebody says that they wrote all over their book, because I feel like when I write all over a book, it's because I love it, and I want to remember things. So to hear somebody say, oh, I scribbled all over your book, is like the biggest compliment you can get.
Yes, and I mean it. It was just every page I was wanting to underline everything. It was so good. I want to jump in just on a personal note. I mentioned that we had adopted, and for me, I think if Kisses from Katie might be, it's about a lot of things, but about you saying yes and God opening doors. And I felt like this book might have been maybe the stories where God had said no to you, and how you walk through some of those situations. And I just felt like, specifically when you talked about your, raising your daughters, it was just so much of a Me Too moment for me. Just as another adoptive mom, just those feelings and the struggling of, I'm just not enough. Like, God must have made a mistake of putting me as their mom. But you say, one of the things you say in one of the things I had underlined, it says the end of ourselves is a very sweet place to be, and our need for Jesus is a beautiful thing to him. So talk about what that's looked like for you, especially as you've raised your daughters.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can probably all relate to that as parents, adoptive or not. I think parenting is hard no matter what. We always kind of feel like, oh my, I'm in over my head here, or, there's no instruction manual that's specific to our individual child. And then you add to that a whole other level when you're bringing home children who come from really hard places and already have lived a lot of life in a very short amount of years. And I think, as with most things in my life, I walked into it with confidence thinking, yes, I can do this. I can help these people and I can love these people. And, it doesn't take long to realize, oh, I am in over my head and I cannot do this by myself. Only Jesus can do this. And I think that's really beautiful. And I've learned a lot about myself from being in that place of only Jesus is going to be able to do this. And I think God wants us in that place. I think that's where he grows us, and that's where he meets us, and that's where he gets to show us his strength when we realize that we can't do things in our own strength,
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that you just mentioned. It's just at the beginning you say, that you walk into thing with maybe what you might call a naive faith, thinking that God's good because, he makes the endings turn out well and right. And that maybe, and I think it's something that we all believe that, at times that God is only glorified when maybe a life is saved or it turns out, I'm saying air quotes, the right way.
Right.
You spend a lot of time in this book talking, like I said, about times that maybe God has said no, and just walking through really difficult circumstances and where's hope and all of that. Maybe talk about, your opening story, about a specific time in your family where God really was not listening to you and your ideas for your family. What did that look like, and how did you see God glorified in that situation?
Yeah, I talk about at the end of the last book, as well as kind of in the opening of this new one. We had been fostering a little girl for almost 3 years, Jane, and we had searched high and low for biological family. We had advertised on the radio and in the newspaper, and we hadn't found anybody who she could go and live with. Nobody had come forward, and so we had fostered a lot of other children before, intentionally fostering them and knowing that they would go back to family, but this felt very different because we couldn't find any family, and so I had begun the process to adopt her. I was actually almost finished with it when her biological mother found us and really just came to our house and declared that she would be taking Jane home. And so, within a matter of about 2 weeks, she had taken her and was living about 5 hours away from our home with Jane. And, it was this really strange place to be because everything in me had built this organization around fighting for family and desiring that children would stay in their family and not be institutionalized and not be sent to the streets and not be taken away from their birth families. And yet here I was, faced with the opportunity to support this birth mom in raising her child and really still feeling like, no, that's my child. Which, you can imagine the battle that kind of went on within me. And so I kind of oscillated between really trying very hard to put on a happy face and support them. And at the same time, really asking God, why would you do this to me? And this is not fair. And I want my daughter back, and selfishly just pray, and God, make something happen so that she has to come back and live with us. And I know, that sounds even kind of ugly to say out loud, but that's truly where my heart was, just not asking God what his will was, but asking God, to give me the thing that I wanted. And I felt like he very clearly not only answered no to that, but really asked me to step out of my comfort zone and continue to love Jane and her birth mother. We even ended up welcoming them back into our home for a little while. They were living in our guest room while her birth mom was between jobs. And we've continued to be in relationship with them now for many years. And I think it's one of those really hard situations where I kept trying to write the ending myself. And I kept thinking like, oh, well, God is going to redeem this and make this good because more people are going to be saved, right? Nancy's going to get saved and then more people will hear the gospel. Or God is going to make this good because, fill in the blank. I would kind of come up with my own happy ending, if you will. And I can honestly say like none of those happy endings really happened. I'm not sure what God's up to, and I'm not sure why he allowed the story to unfold that way. But I do believe and trust him that he is working all things for good. And I know in my own heart that he really grew my faith and my trust in him during that time. And I think ultimately that's what he wants for all of us, right? He wants all of us to be in such intimate relationship with him that we can trust him, even if we don't see the happy ending on our own terms, or even if we are not sure how he's being glorified or what good could come out of this. And that story kind of preceded a really difficult few years for our family. We had several people we loved die and just watched several people through really difficult situations and got to really be in relationship with a lot of people we love through very difficult situations. And I'm just really thankful that he was kind of teaching me all that on the front end and has only strengthened and confirmed that throughout the next few years.
Well, what I love in all of that, it's just the trust and the love that you built with Jesus. You describe it actually in some later chapters after you go through the season. And you say, in the darkest night, I was having a love affair with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, what does that mean?
Well, I felt like we were in a season of life where really nobody could understand my situation. I have wonderful, amazing, very supportive family and friends and church members and community members, and they were all wonderful and would bring over food or take the kids for the day so that I could have some quiet time, community in the best sense. But still, like, who understands being a single mom of 13 kids and having people on hospice care live in your guest room as they die? It's not a normal thing. And so I just felt like, I almost felt like God had kind of hidden me away. Like he had kind of put me in this place and in this season that nobody could understand so that I would seek him because he alone understood. And where everybody else would need some kind of explanation, God didn't need an explanation. And where everybody else, not everybody else, but certainly many people were looking to me to be this very collected, have all the right Christian answers type of person. God didn't need me to be that. And it was okay if I just fell apart and wanted to scream about what had happened, or cry about what had happened to him. And so in that sense, I felt like he used this really dark time to draw me away from the world and towards himself more and more. And in that, I fell more in love with who God is, because I found that he really is who he says he is. He really is near. He really does not leave or forsake us. He really is kind. He really is merciful. I felt like, in so many situations, he didn't give me what I was asking for, and he didn't take my pain away, but he was near. He was there with me, and he hurt when I hurt, and he saw my grief and he grieved with me. And I really think I experienced his love in a whole new way that I had never experienced from another person. It was like he was the only one who truly, truly understood. And that was really beautiful to me.
Mm-hmm. And I picked that out because I so relate to that. As the past couple years, like I mentioned, we had adopted, and just some other difficult things, I do feel the same way, is that God has hidden us. I mean, like with him, and he himself, and you talk about this in the book, but he himself is the reward in these times, and he himself is actually our hope during these difficult times.
Absolutely.
So your book is called Daring to Hope. So as we close out, we have just a few minutes left. What hope would you give to those maybe that are currently facing some difficult times and trying to find God in the midst of that?
I think my biggest encouragement would just be that he loves you and he sees you. You know, he sees us in our pain. He sees what we're going through, and he understands it better than anybody ever could. He understands, and he desires to be with us in those times too. He desires to be near to us and to hold us. We are his beloved. You know, I just love, I feel like so many times during our dark season, I would just imagine myself as a little girl kind of curled up in a daddy's lap. And that's what he felt like to me. You know, he felt like God who was holding me, who cared for me that much that he would allow me to just kind of scoot right up next to him. And that would be my encouragement to anybody who's struggling, is God desires to hold you like his beloved child, who you are, and just to be near to you and comfort you.
And that's so good. And doesn't that take away the fear of anything that we're going to face? I mean, just to know that the good can come, the bad can come, the happy endings and the sad endings, and no matter what, he's with us. And I just think that takes so much of the fear of the future away for a lot of us.
Absolutely. When we know that he's beside us, we can weather any storm. Truly, we can.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I wanted to finish up. I just saw actually that you're coming back to the States later this year. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll be in the States for the release of the book, which is October 3rd. And then I'm there for about 2 weeks doing some traveling and some different speaking. And then my brother actually is getting married at the end of that time. So I'll get to be at his wedding too, which I'm obviously most excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's so great that could all work out together.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the new book. I'm so excited about it. I hope everybody picks it up, and this also becomes a New York Times bestseller. Where can people connect with you just to see what's going on with the ministry and your family?
The best place to connect is at our website, www.amazima.org. That's AMAZIMA.org. There's all kind of information on there about how to sponsor a child, how to get involved. We're even currently looking for some new staff if anybody's feeling really bold. There is also a link to my blog on there, and so you can connect with me that way as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Amy.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Katie. What I hope you got a little glimpse of, and the book, like I said, just does a beautiful job with, is just to see that Katie was obedient to God and was just so faithful to love the people around her. And yet she begins to go through this dry season where things are really hard and they're not going the way she thought. And, you know, as she's talking about this, I just wonder if some of you that are listening are there too. You know, where you've been faithful and you've done the things God have asked you to do, and yet life is still painful in places and it's hard to remain faithful. And I just want to echo Katie's words that these are the moments that he can show us his strength. He can hide us under his wings and show us parts of his character he couldn't otherwise show us. And we can remember that he loves us and sees us, and it is being used for his glory, even when it doesn't feel like it. So, guys, I hope you are so encouraged. And once again, I hope you pick up her book, Daring to Hope. You can get that link and other show notes over at abidingministries.net. Make sure you're also following us over on Facebook and Instagram. We are Abiding Ministries on both of those places. So, guys, thank you so much for being here this week. It's such a pleasure. And we'll see you next week on Feathers.